Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to our July the 14th, 2026 regular monthly meeting, Town of Culpeper. Mr. Short, pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Consent agenda, Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. On the consent agenda this evening is approval to purchase one replacement Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicle, approval to purchase a 2026 wood chipper, paid bills listings, and minutes of previous meetings.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Sorry,
Special-
Mr. Mayor, who made the motion?
Which one made the motion?
I didn't hear a motion.
I made the motion.
You made the motion?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah? All right. Special items and recognition. Introduction of a new executive director for the Museum of Culpeper History, Mrs. Kimberly Trickett. Would you come forward?
Mayor Reeves, distinguished guests of the Town Council, distinguished members of the Town Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'm here on behalf of the Board of Directors for the Museum of Culpeper History to introduce our new Executive Director. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce James J.G. Gardner Harrison, III. He was selected to lead the organization by the museum's Board of Directors in May, bringing with him an exceptional combination of professional expertise, leadership experience, and a passion for connecting people to history. He is a graduate of the College of William & Mary. Jay has dedicated 47 years to historical research, public programming, archaeology, historic resource management, museum operations, historic preservation, education, and tourism. His career spans both the public and private sectors, including state and federal government service, as well as for the past 13 years, he served with the Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of the American Indian. Over the course of his distinguished career, he's accumulated 4 decades of museum and cultural institutional experience, decades of project and personnel management, extensive experience in historic property stewardship, grant development, fundraising, visitor services, community engagement, and nonprofit administration. He has also been a champion of the inclusive historical interpretation, helping to tell the stories of Indigenous, African American, Hispanic American communities through research, programming, and public outreach. He is a 7th-generation Virginian from Fredericksburg. Jay brings not only professional credentials, but a personal connection to the history of the Commonwealth. Since 1987, he has portrayed James Monroe in first-person living history programs, bringing the life and legacy of our nation's 5th president to audiences across the country. In more than 300 performances, he has interpreted Monroe as a soldier, a diplomat, statesman, and president, including a very memorable appearance here in Culpeper during our bicentennial commemoration of Lafayette's visit. Jay's dedication to public history continues through his service on the Loudoun County and Fredericksburg VA 250 committees as our nation commemorates the 250th anniversary of American independence. With his remarkable professional experience, a passion for education and preservation, and a commitment to connecting people to history, Jay is exceptionally well suited to lead our museum. He's been a longtime supporter of the museum and Culpeper community at large, having conducted archaeological excavations at the Burgundy House in 1997, notably one of the oldest homes in Culpeper. So this time I'd like to invite Mr. Jay Harrison to the podium to further introduce himself.
Mr. Mayor, members of Town Council, it's an honor to be here, and I thank you, Kimberly, for introducing me. It's been a pleasure the last 2 months getting to know many of the stakeholders in our community of Culpeper, and I'm very proud to be here on behalf of the Board of Directors of the museum, with which Kimberly has pointed out I've had some association with over the last 20 years or so as an archaeologist, as an interpreter, as an educator, and as an historian. I've had a chance to meet some of you, but I look forward to collaborating with you. You are, of course, our major collaborator and downtown stakeholder in this community. And it's important to note that the museum is not only a museum, but also a de facto historical society. Since we really don't have an historical society in the community, this one is functioning in a two-role manner to take history from the community out into all the component communities of the county of Culpeper, not only the town itself, but also villages, crossroads, and to educate, inform, and encourage participation and collaboration. I'm very excited to be here and at this role now that I've retired from the Smithsonian. I'm very excited to be here and look forward to working with you all and other stakeholders. Look forward to meeting many others in the community. And if I can be of help to you, my door is always open. I look forward to spending time getting to know all of you. And thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you today, this evening, and saying hello. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
All right. Public forum. Members of the public may address council on matters related to the town government at this time. Please state your name and address for the record. Each speaker shall have 3 minutes and shall comply with the citizen participation policy. Groups are requested to have a spokesperson. Questions should be directed to the mayor. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak this time? Well, let me get David Wynn up first. You David Wynn? All right. You come on up, sir. All right.
When you're ready. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I wanted to first say that I am in favor of the manner of motorcycle parking amendment as amended. And the reason is, I'm a biker, as you can see. I don't know if any of you are bikers, but my background is 43 years as an expert in real estate and urban development and land planning. Prior to that, while I was in college for 5 years in graduate school, in my sophomore year in college, I was already on my planning commission for my town. So I am infused with real estate, have been in it for 50 years, and I lead a team of civil engineers. I'm an expert witness for real estate matters, and recognized in many of the courts in the jurisdictions in Virginia and other states. And so I'll first touch on the matters of the manner of parking. And most roads have a crown, and the reason they have a crown is because it directs the water to the curbs. So that means the low spot is at the curbs. And when motorcycles park, they're taught and they understand, and it's practical, to back into the space and block your rear tire against the curb, because we do not have a parking brake. And a bike could roll, and so you're taught, and you back into the parking space. In a parallel parking space, we do not park wheels parallel to the parking space for that reason. Also, because of the crown of the street, if we were to park parallel, that means that a lot of bikes, depending on the weight and the height and the kickstand and so on and so forth, would be precariously perched at a straight angle rather than leaning over because of the crown of the road. The high side of the road would be on your left-hand side. So it's best that we back in and we use the curb to check our bike. Otherwise, they're going to fall over or they're going to roll. As far as your front-end parking, you guys say that you must have your front wheel to the curb. Again, because of the crown, you can't do that on a motorcycle in all cases, because often, because of the crown of the road slopes down to the curb. If you were to go head first, front wheel into the parking space, and you have a 933-pound bike like mine, you're not going to get it out without asking somebody to help you roll it out. So it's just not practical. We do not have a reverse gear, so we can't back uphill when you ask us to park in forward. As far as the width of the bike, my big bike is, including the handlebars, 41 inches wide. My small bike is 31 inches wide. You can easily, a typical parking space is 23 feet long. You can get 5 motorcycles in there if it's a big bagger like the one on my shirt right here.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Mayor Reeves and honored members of the Town Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here to express my gratitude for your continued support of local historical programs, community historic organizations, and the many, many volunteers. I'm Andrew Kotowski, and I live at 1130 Oak Lawn Drive. I serve on several positions in the town. I am chair of the Architecture Review Board, on the board of directors of the Museum of Culpeper History, and a member of the Culpeper VA 250 Committee. The work of these and many similar groups preserve and share our historical and cultural stories for the present and future generations. However, beyond the feel-good aspect of this work, there's a real and measurable positive economic impact to Culpeper: heritage tourism. Heritage tourism is a major global engine, estimated to be worth billions of dollars annually. It acts as a primary tool for historic preservation in incentivizing local governments and private entities to protect landmarks and cultural practices. According to travel data, heritage travelers typically stay longer, spend more money in local economy, and travel more frequently than traditional leisure tourists. Culpeper's historical organizations develop tours, programs, and projects large and small in close cooperation with the town and county economic and tourism development offices. We recognize that our work attracts visitors and spending dollars to our community. An example of a large program is last fall's celebration of Lafayette's 1825 visit to Culpeper, and a small project is the new red and white flowers and planters in front of the train station. In April of this year, the town of Culpeper's Economic and Tourism Development Office recently won 3 prestigious statewide Virgo Awards from the Virginia Association of Destination Marketing Organizations, including 2 built around heritage tourism. The support of you, our town council members, and many town staff make these successes possible. In closing, I would like to recognize Vice Mayor Short and Council Member Schmidt for their vital service to the Architecture Review Board and Museum of Culpeper History Board of Directors. On behalf of our board members, we thank you. Mayor Reeves, members of the Town Council, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. There are so many exciting things we can do together, and I look forward to working with you in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Tabitha Fulton. I live and work in downtown Culpeper. I own Botanical Dwellings and Fulton Found on East Davis Street. I've been following the discussion surrounding Ordinance Section 11-45, and from my understanding, parking availability has been one of the primary concerns raised throughout these conversations. This ordinance affects motorcycle parking throughout downtown, regardless of whether someone is attending a motorcycle meetup or simply visiting Culpeper. If parking availability is the concern, I struggle to understand how reducing motorcycle parking density is the solution to that problem. Motorcycles can safely share parking spaces and use downtown parking more efficiently than passenger vehicles. I hope the ordinance continues to encourage the safe and efficient use of available parking. As a volunteer at many of the Moto meetups, I've handed out downtown shopping and dining guides, worked to communicate expectations to riders, and through that involvement, I've become familiar with many of the people who are attending these events. Culpeper has long served as a gateway to Skyline Drive, to Shenandoah National Park. Motorcyclists have been traveling through this region for decades. What these meetups have done is give many of those riders a reason to stop instead of simply passing through. I've watched many of them return later with family and friends to shop and dine outside of meetup mornings. Some have actually become regulars in our downtown community. As a downtown business owner, my concern is whether we are encouraging people to visit and shop and spend in downtown Culpeper, or are we creating barriers that have them choose somewhere else? I hope this decision remains focused on practical solutions that directly address the concerns being raised while supporting long-term health and economic vitality of downtown Culpeper. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council members. My name is Sarah Fulton. I live at 109 Rawson Lane in Culpeper. My historic 1900 farmhouse sits on the west side of the railroad tracks, placing my family directly on the front line of the incoming Copper Ridge Data Center campus and the proposed Palomino substation. Because my property directly borders this mega project, I'm here tonight to urge this council to hold the line on site plans. Do not allow Stack Infrastructure or Dominion Energy to cut corners on our community's natural defenses. The massive scale of this industrial campus will permanently alter our neighborhood with heavy equipment glare, visual blight, and persistent electric hums. To protect our homes, I ask that the town enforce two non-negotiable site plan conditions. First, enforce a zero clearing mandate for the mature specimen trees on the western edge of the development. These trees provide an irreplaceable, established shield against industrial noise. Second, require an enhanced multi-tiered evergreen vegetative buffer that completely breaks the line of sight from Rawson Lane to the high voltage substation structures. However, trees and shrubs only mitigate what we can see and hear. We also need the legal tools to enforce peace. Our current town noise code relies heavily on subjective limits, like sounds heard 50 feet away or text that is easily tied up in litigation. I urge the council to amend our town noise ordinances to require objective, measurable dBA decibel limits, specifically capping residential boundaries at 55 dBA during the day and 40 dBA at night. Crucially, the town must incorporate DBC weighting into its ordinance. Standard dBA metrics completely miss these low-frequency vibrations, the wall-rattling hums, and structural rumbles unique to massive data center cooling fans and substation transformers. Finally, we cannot prove a violation if we don't know where we started. I ask that you require developers to fund an independent third-party baseline noise assessment of both dBA and DBC levels at my property and surrounding homes before construction begins. Grid expansion shouldn't mean erasing 126 years of Culpeper's history or sacrificing our health to low-frequency noise pollution. Please hold these developers to the highest standard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Close the public forum at this time. Closed session items, Mr. Short.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to rescind the motion made on June 9, 2026, appointing Wilson Acquaintance to the Industrial Development Authority to fill an unexpired 4-year term that began immediately and expires on October 28, 2029, and authorize the town clerk to notify Mr. Acquaintance and the Culpeper Circuit Court clerk.
Can I get a second? Second? Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
All right. All right. Submission of quarter reports from ABCs. Council received the reports. Is there any question on the quarterly reports? All right. Public hearing on amendment to the UDO and zoning map. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Before you this evening, we have a public hearing on updates to the Unified Development Ordinance along with the town zoning map. As we went through the process last year of the adoption of this, we did indicate that we likely would have some changes that would be brought before you in upcoming months of unintended consequences, and so we've identified several of those. So running through this, essentially there's 4 different categories that we'll touch on briefly. The first is simply updates related to typographical changes. We won't actually go through those. Those were identified within the report, but that was one category of changes that we had. The second is legislative-driven changes. Our General Assembly was pretty active in this most recent general session, and so we have 2 changes to the code related to their actions. The third are changes that we have from experience. These are these unintended consequences, and we'll run through those briefly. And then we have some updates to the zoning map, and I'll discuss those when we get to that particular section. So the first of the 2 legislative-driven changes was related to House Bill 655, and it's related to manufactured housing. This is really a relatively minor change that essentially allows manufactured housing to be considered real property as long as they essentially take care of certain actions related to the chassis. So this is something that is really relatively inconsequential in town, but we are bringing ourselves in line with state code with this proposed change. The second one related to the legislature is related to House Bill 888, and this is to do with off-street parking requirements for residential development and allowing for a potential reduction in off-street parking. This process essentially we've done to mirror our satellite parking requirements. And so if there is the availability of public parking within a relatively close proximity, 600 feet of the housing development, they can request up to a 20% reduction in the available on-site parking that's provided for this development. Again, this is a change that's required per state codes changes, but we've tried to do it in such a way that it's as innocuous as possible and ties in with the other standards within the town. As we look at our experience changes, I've tried to break them down into different categories. The first is particular code sections that we're essentially adding back that they existed within our prior zoning ordinance. The first is this provision of satellite parking, the ability to use a different lot or a different parcel that may be slightly removed from the subject parcel to provide parking as long as pedestrian accommodations are in place. The second are exemptions for town signs and approved signs on town infrastructure. So examples of those are the CRI banners that we see throughout the downtown, providing exemptions of those from having to go through the permitting process. Again, that was an oversight when we went through this update. Adding in specific language related to zoning permits. We did not have language in the current UDO that provided definitions and expiration dates for zoning permits, and so we've added that language back in. In terms of improving the process of submissions and the preparation of applications, the changes that we have there relate to landscape plan preparations. Essentially, if you're following the guidance, we don't require it to be signed by a certified landscape architect. It can be done by a civil engineer. Again, just trying to make that process easier if you're following all the guidance. Making tree surveys that we have a requirement for be limited essentially just to specimen trees as opposed to all trees. Again, trying to make this process simpler. Providing clarification for outdoor storage areas in terms of what the process is. Providing clarification on food truck applications, essentially identifying that all food trucks are required to individually apply for the permitting. Looking at changes that we see as being business-friendly in terms of the proposed ones. Looking at modifying the language related to awnings and canopies within town. Essentially, right now, the language prohibits plastic awnings. When we wrote that, it was intended to mean the hard plastic awning ones. Essentially, now all of the vinyl and canvas-type canopy awnings that you see actually include plastic in them for durability, and so it was an unintended consequence that we were prohibiting those, so we've clarified that language. We've increased the clarification in some of the use categories as far as business uses that are permitted, provided additional clarification related to industrial uses where their use is primarily related to office space and the storage and allowing those to be classified as office uses. Allowing fuel price electronic message boards without a conditional use permit. So essentially if you're coming in for a fuel canopy, that's seen as essentially an integral part of that business and not requiring you to go through additional hoops in that instance. Looking at our height definition and providing clarification. Essentially if you're using that outside articulation of stories, that we use that for our definition of height as opposed to the actual stories inside. So for example, our large scale big box buildings or the data center buildings that we're seeing, they're able to get the height equivalent of up to 4 stories or whatever is permitted within there, even though they may have fewer stories inside. But we ask that they essentially make the outside look like they have those number of stories with shadow lines and that sort of articulation. Looking at the homeowner side of things, we've removed some redundant home occupation limitations. Essentially, we had one that was related to those who are operating certain vehicle services, taxi-type services, but those were being specifically prohibited. However, the impact there of those operations, if any sort of marked commercial vehicles are parked within a garage, is already taken care of, and there's that requirement that commercial vehicles be parked within an enclosed area. So essentially, we removed some of the redundant language there. As well as we created an exemption to facade requirements if folks are adding a shed. Essentially, sheds up to 100 square feet don't have to comply with the facade requirements. Otherwise, all accessory buildings were supposed to essentially match the primary structure on the property.
Specific question about that. I mean, most commercial sheds, they're really made of the same materials. If your house had cement board siding, would your shed have to look the same way? I mean, is that, or how do you find similar materials?
Again, it's very flexible, it's very generous, it's very broad. We're happy to accept the argument that the homeowner makes in that regard. As far as the similarity, if they were to paint it a similar color than the house, we would consider that to be similar in its design. Again, we weren't intending this to be onerous in its application. Really, this is more applicable when you have a larger scale.
Did you say onerous?
We were not intending it to be
Okay.
onerous in its
Onerous.
application. Onerous.
Owners, folks said, not owners.
Okay.
Got it, thank you.
The other changes that we had safety concerns, and so we essentially have an explicit prohibition of signs or flags, any other attachments on utility and light poles. And finally, the other changes we had were limitations on flags. We tried to make sure that folks could have a United States flag, a state flag, those sorts of things, but limiting the extent that they could be used, when they could be used for signage purposes as well. The final category of changes that we have are related to the zoning map. Those fell into 3 categories. The first is related to Culpeper United Methodist Church. Really, this is a consistency oversight that we had when we went through the UDO process. All of those church properties that had civic building types of traditional church-type structures, we identified those properties as the neighborhood commercial mix, the NX zoning, to allow them to have many of the ancillary uses that churches often have in terms of some of the support services. This one was missed, and so we're looking to remedy that situation now. The largest category that we had related to the changes were open space parcels that were identified through subdivision plats over the years. All of those parcels we are looking to identify as parks and open space parcels. The reason we do that is if in the future HOAs go defunct, people acquire some of these parcels, they sometimes will come back and look to try and develop the particular parcels that were intended to be open space for that particular community. By having them zoned as parks and open space, it essentially precludes those from being developed for residential or commercial purposes. So again, we've gone through the various plats that we have on file and identified those that we had not caught in the first round. So we had a number here related to Country Club Estates, Elizabeth's Crossing in the Ridgeview area, the Highview Court area, Lakeview and Pelham's Reach, Ashley, would you mind advancing the slides for me? Thank you. The Meadows, and this is a further section of the Meadows. Now, this one actually has the third example. We realized that when we went through a rezoning in the 1980s, there was accidentally included within that on our zoning maps a parcel to planned unit development that had not gone through that rezoning process. So we've proposed to remedy that situation and zone that particular parcel residential suburban RS, which is the like-for-like zoning with its adjoining parcels in that particular instance. I think we have one more map. And this is the Virginia Avenue area, again, more of those parks and open space parcels. And so those are the proposed updates. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on this previously.
Anyone have any questions? Andrew?
No, just
John?
good work on catching those. I really appreciate you taking the time also to go through that with me. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, Andrew. Open the floor at this time for public hearing. Please state your name and address for the record. Each speaker should have 3 minutes. Does anyone like to speak on this item tonight? No one? Close the public hearing at this time. All right. 10.3, orders amending chapter 27, UDO and zoning map. First reading, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this did go before the Planning Commission for public hearing. Planning Commission did recommend approval of the changes, and so before you tonight is a recommendation to approve the changes to the Unified Development Ordinance along with the town zoning map.
Second.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Ollinger? Aye. Mayor Reeves?
Aye.
Councilmember Ramikis?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Short?
Aye.
Councilmember Sternberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yao?
Aye.
The motion carries.
All right. 10.4, public hearing on proposed FY 27 budget amendment. Howard? Oh, we don't have Howard.
No Howard this evening. Good evening, Mayor and council members.
All right.
What we have here is a public hearing on the proposed budget amendments for the fiscal year 2027 budget in the amount of $3,202,479, which represents 4.7% of the adopted FY 2027 budget. These budget amendments are intended to be used for the partial cash debt defeasance for the 2016 general obligation bonds, which has been previously approved by council, as well as the purchase of the replacement police vehicle that was approved this evening on the consent. Any questions?
Any questions? John?
Maybe the town manager just put this in a nutshell for the public, what exactly we're doing.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're paying down general obligation debt for the general fund, so the town will be debt-free in the general fund at the end of this this payment of the 2016 cash debt. Some of it is also towards some of the other enterprise funds, but the primary goal was for the general fund to be debt-free.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Open the floor this time at public hearing. Please state your name and address for the record. Each speaker should have 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this item tonight? No one? Close the public hearing. All right.
All right, the
10.5.
recommendation of staff is for council to approve the amendments for the fiscal 2027 budget in the amount of $3,202,479.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussions? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Reeves?
Aye.
Councilmember Ramikis?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Short?
Aye.
Councilmember Sternberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yao?
Aye.
Councilmember Ollinger?
Aye.
The motion carries.
10.6, ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Town Code, second reading. Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Beginning on July 1st of this year, no final action may be taken on any item added after an agenda or added to the agenda after the meeting has commenced unless the matter is time-sensitive or is subject to a closed session per new state law. The term time-sensitive is not defined by FOIA. Additionally, because this language is new, there is no court decision or advisory opinion interpreting what time-sensitive is. And this could increase the town's legal exposure if an item is added to an agenda and acted on. Also, Town Code Section 2-77 requires that all items be referred to council from committee. This means that an item must be put on an agenda at least 3 weeks prior to a council meeting. And a time-sensitive item may come up in that period that we can't add to the agenda. So what staff is recommending is that we change and amend Section 2-77 to allow the town manager to add items believed to be time-sensitive to the regular council meeting agenda. We believe this will reduce the number of items that would need to be added at a council meeting and thereby be in conformance with the intent of Senate Bill 699, which is the new law that was enacted to do this. And it would also reduce the town's liability because we would be in compliance by adding that item before the agenda is posted. The recommendation is that council hold the second reading and adopt ordinance number 2026-005, amending Chapter 2, Section 277 of the Town Code related to order of business, and authorize the mayor and town clerk to execute the documents.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have a discussion.
John?
So just to make sure that we understand this properly, so any late items that need to be added to the agenda have to go through you and not through the council, correct?
Yes, right now there is not a mechanism to put an item on the council agenda, whether it's the mayor, council, or me. And what this would do is items that I believe that are time sensitive, say a grant application where there's a deadline comes up last minute that we find out about, we can add that onto the council agenda, even though it didn't go to committee. Of course, then it's up to council to decide whether they want to hear that item or not. But that's what the intent is. Otherwise, if we added it at the meeting, then we would have to make that determination that it was time sensitive, and someone could question that based on state code. Whereas if I make that determination, it's just a determination between council and the manager as to whether it's.
So am I understanding correctly that the state is taking away our ability as council members, as elected members, to bring something at a meeting to add it to the agenda? Am I hearing that correctly?
Currently, town code does not allow council to do that, not state law. What this new law would do is it doesn't allow an item to be added by anyone after the agenda is already approved. If an item is put on at that point, then you'll have to wait to approve that to a future council meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stall this longer, I'm just trying to really understand it. So just for instance, we had a couple of items that we added to the agenda at the last council meeting, recognizing 2 months to allow the mayor to sign these proclamations. Those were added to the agenda that night of the meeting, so that will no longer be permitted. We'll have to run that through a committee process.
Mr. Mayor?
Do you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, I think we're missing that little piece. My understanding is that you can add it to the agenda, but you can't act on it in the same meeting.
Correct. The FOIA Council came forward with this bill to prohibit bodies from adding actionable items to an agenda without public notice, so that the agenda was posted and then public bodies were adding items at the meeting, and the public didn't have a chance to weigh in and know that those items were on the agenda to attend the meeting.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
All right. Anyone else? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Ramikis?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Short?
Aye.
Councilmember Sternberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Yao?
Aye.
Councilmember Olinger,
Aye.
Mayor Reeves.
Aye.
The motion carries.
10.7, ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the Town Code, second reading. Andrew.
Mr. Mayor, this first reading was held last month, and just as a reminder, the town has adopted and enforces sections 104, 105, and 106 of the Virginia Maintenance Code related to enforcement, generally violations, and unsafe structures. Town code does not currently specify how violations of these provisions shall be enforced, which means that sort of by default, we essentially have to go through a criminal process in terms of looking to enforce it. Town Legal Counsel has recommended that we include the provisions as permitted by state code with civil penalties associated with them to aid in the effective enforcement of these provisions. So the recommendation before you this evening is that council hold the second reading and adopt ordinance number O-2026-007, amending Chapter 4 of the Town Code by adding sections 4.6 and 4.7 relating to criminal and civil enforcement of building code violations, and authorize the mayor and town clerk to execute the document. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Andrew. Motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Two, so. You my second? All right. Any discussion? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Short,
Aye.
Councilmember Sternberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Yao,
Aye.
Councilmember Olinger,
Aye.
Mayor Reeves,
Aye.
Councilmember Mikas.
Aye.
Motion carries.
10.8, ordinance amending Chapter 11, Section 11-36 of the Town Code, first reading. Assistant Chief White.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. By way of background, Personnel Ordinance Committee recommended that the ordinance 11-36 be amended. It currently does not allow or address specifically motorcycle parking within our municipal lots and through the areas, and there was a decision at Personnel Ordinance Committee that an amendment be a change to allow up to 5 motorcycles to occupy a single parking space, provided that the motorcycles park in a manner that does not impede traffic flow, impede any travel lanes, obstruct any pedestrian walkways, impede fire lanes, or use of any additional adjacent parking spots. Specifically, the changes in the ordinance would allow within the municipal parking spots, as I said, the pursuant to authority granted under 46.2-1220, which is state code, to amend it that up to 5 two-wheel motorcycles, motor-driven cycles, and 3-wheeled motorcycles lawfully registered for operation on the highway may occupy a single marked parking space within a municipal parking lot, provided that all the motorcycles are parked entirely within the boundaries of the designated parking space. No motorcycle extends into a travel lane, pedestrian walkway, access aisle, or adjacent parking space. The parking arrangement does not impede the lawful ingress or egress of another motorcycle lawfully occupying the same parking space, and each motorcycle occupying a parking space shall be considered a separate vehicle for the purposes of parking enforcement and shall individually comply with all applicable time limitations, permit requirements, payment requirements, and other parking restrictions applicable to that parking space. It goes on to say that at all municipal parking lots, there would be entrance and exit signs erected, and that motorists shall comply with such signs. And it does say that any vehicle parked in violation of this section may be moved or towed at the expense and risk of the owner. And officers would take reasonable attempts to locate an operator upon moving or towing the vehicle.
Yeah, any question?
How does the state code address motorcycles in municipal parking lots?
So state code specifically talks in 46.2-1220, it talks about, it says 2 motorcycles, but then it gives local governing bodies the authority to adopt an ordinance to allow up to as many motorcycles, more than 2 that they may desire or see fit within their local geographic regions.
Did we look at any other communities in Virginia that have?
It's my understanding that the chief has done some research in some of the other local areas. Most other areas are anywhere from 3 to 4. I don't think he personally found any that had up to 5, but most did allow either up to 3 or up to 4 motorcycles in any parking lots, whether that be on street or off street like this municipal parking.
Anyone else?
Seeing as how you and the department are going to be enforcing this, what are your personal thoughts on this? Do you believe the number is valid, or do you feel it should be changed?
My personal thoughts are whatever the council wants them to be on this matter.
All right, anyone else? Anyone else? Thank you on that one, but I got another one for you. 10.9. Huh? I said, was it anyone else?
Yeah, question for you.
Uh-huh. Oh, you got a question for me?
Well, before, okay, this is first and second reading?
This is the first read.
I'm saying it.
No action.
Can we dispense with the second reading and vote on this today as opposed to next?
Yeah, sure, we make a motion.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can we vote on this today by requesting the second waiver, second reading be waived?
So moved.
Well, I'm looking for, if that's doable. We've never done that before. Usually it's sort of decided beforehand.
You can do that.
You making the motion?
I don't know yet. Well, what comes first? The motion or the waiving of the second reading, or is that part of the motion?
The waiving the second reading can be part of the motion.
Right.
All right.
You making the motion? You don't want to make the motion?
I just want to see where we stood procedurally.
Huh?
I just want to see where we stood procedurally. Anybody else can make the motion, it doesn't have to be me.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I so move that we waive the second reading and vote on the ordinance as it stands.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
What about discussion, Mr. Mayor?
Any discussion?
Okay. I want to know how we got from, I would like to know how we got from 3 vehicles. Where were we, what was the last, I didn't miss the last committee meeting, I was out of town, sorry about that. But the previous meeting, I think the discussion was 4 vehicles in municipal lots, that's how I remember it. How did we get up to 5?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that I think.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
sorry.
I can answer that if you want. In the last Personnel and Ordinance Committee meeting, I think an amendment was made. The chief at that point was recommending 3 motorcycles, up to 3 motorcycles in a municipal parking lot. And then later there was some discussion for on-street parking where the number 5 had come up, was mentioned, and then a motion was made to amend both on-street parking and municipal parking to keep them at a steady number of up to 5. And as to why that amendment was made, I can't speak. I know there were a number of citizens who spoke on motorcycle parking, just as they did here tonight. And so an amendment was made, and staff was recommended to change that up to 5 motorcycles in 1 parking spot.
Maybe we should have started with on-street parking instead of off-street parking.
Huh? Ready to vote? Everybody ready to vote?
Yeah, call the question.
Huh?
Yeah, call the question.
All right, all in favor?
Roll call.
You have to roll call for
Oh,
an
roll
ordinance.
call, all right.
Councilmember Schmidt,
No.
Vice Mayor Short,
Aye.
Councilmember Sternberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Yao, Councilmember Olinger,
Aye.
Mayor Reeves,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramikis.
No.
Councilmember Russell.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. 10.9, ordinance amending Chapter 11, Section 11-45 of the Town Code, first reading. Assistant Chief White.
Okay, very similar to 1136 we just read. This is 1145, and it again discusses manner of parking, but this is specifically in street parking, and directs motorcycles to park in a manner with the flow of traffic. It does it adopts the exception of 46.2-1220, and again allows up to 5 motorcycles to occupy a single marked on-street parking space simultaneously. Motorcycles may be parked at an angle within a parking space, provided that the motorcycle is oriented generally in the direction of the flow of the traffic. Again, all motorcycles shall be parked entirely within the demarcated lines established of the parking space and shall not extend into any travel lane, bicycle lane, sidewalk, crosswalk, or adjacent parking space. The operator of each motorcycle shall ensure that the parking arrangement does not impede the lawful ingress or egress of another motorcycle lawfully occupying the same parking space. Each motorcycle occupying a parking space shall be considered a separate vehicle for the purposes of parking enforcement and shall individually comply with all applicable time limitations, permit requirements, payment requirements, and other parking restrictions applicable to that parking space. And nothing in this subsection would be construed to authorize parking in any area where parking is otherwise prohibited by law, ordinance, traffic control device, or posted restriction.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I so move that we waive the second reading on this ordinance and that we vote on it tonight.
Second.
All right. Madam Clerk? Oh. Go ahead.
Ordinances are a big deal, and it's only a first reading or second reading sometimes. I'm sorry. This ordinance, well, all ordinances will apply to the entire town, not just 1 or 2 blocks on Davis Street. And yet it seems like the focus of the change to this or amendment to this ordinance has to do with one merchant on Davis Street. Personally, I don't think ordinances should be written that way. It should be for the general public, applied to the general public throughout the town, in this case, anywhere where there's marked parking. It just doesn't make any sense to me that it should be driven to benefit one merchant on Davis Street.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So,
Especially since this is lasting now. I mean, once we do this, it's going to be there for a good long time. But businesses on Davis Street, they come and go. Another year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. We need it.
Finish? All right, John.
Yeah, thank you.
You got the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate what my colleague had to say there, and he is right. It does apply townwide. It's not just for one block, for one business. And so, yes, it would be equally distributed. I haven't heard a good reason why we shouldn't have 5 per space or 4 per space, whatever. I've just heard, the only things that I have heard is why we should have, 1 or 2 per space. And that's, to me, it was not even a good reason for that either. So, to me, if we're trying to accommodate motorcycle drivers, and why not be accommodating? So that's where I'm standing.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Janie?
My concern for this is that we're not playing well in the sandbox. This is one merchant who's walked into Davis Street, which is a highlight of our community, and these are not just parking places. These are events, so they're the parking places plus the sidewalks twice a month. So it's like having a car show twice a month without restriction. And, I can just see how easily this can blow up and can affect Davis Street totally. And that's my concern, is we're not playing in the sandbox. We're taking it all.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, go ahead. Read.
Yeah.
With the understanding that this is affecting the entire town, I respect the viewpoints of the people who previously spoken. And while one business has kind of sparked this discussion, I wouldn't necessarily say that this ordinance is catering specifically to one business, because we have data from the town that shows that people coming to and fro with motorcycles have impacted other businesses, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. We had a speaker who said that, hey, people have come back with cars, and this has helped with tourism. We're addressing the here and now, and if in the future it gets to the point where this is a regularly scheduled event that grows beyond proportions, well then, we have an amazing tourism director that we can have coordinate with them. But with things as it stands, if this ordinance were not to pass, it is my understanding that on-street parking would be restricted to 2 motorcycles per space, which, regardless if it's one business, regardless if it's multiple businesses, it doesn't sound feasible at this moment.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Maybe a couple of 100 feet from the event, there's a $5 million, 300 spot parking lot. There's also the Davis Street parking lot at the end of the street. Parking is not the issue, it's the location of the event. Located at the oldest intersection, probably one of the busiest intersections in town, that was laid out in the 18th century, and now we're trying to bring 100 motorcycles in that little spot, and then cram them all into the 20 spaces that we have on the 100 block of Davis Street. We have plenty of parking that can be used. I just see it as a safety issue. I mean, it's dangerous enough on a normal weekend before this event started, with the amount of vehicle and pedestrian traffic, that wanders back and forth through that intersection. Now you're combining it with compounding the likelihood of mishap 100-fold, 200-fold. It doesn't make any sense. It is catering to one person, and you would think that there would be some dialogue, constructive dialogue, to find something in the middle, some accommodation. But no, what we got instead were FOIA requests, wanting all our emails and text messages concerning this, as though there's some kind of conspiracy or something behind it. That's how I interpret, like you're not playing well in the sandbox here. It's all their way or the highway. And I just don't understand why we're capitulating to that. It just doesn't make safety sense to me.
Anyone else?
The second survey, 25 respondents, and only 7 positive responses. I wouldn't consider that a very good report card for that street.
Finished? Anyone else? Roll call.
Now, I would respond to my fellow councilman that we've got to look at the entire survey, and that there was more positive responses, and then there was more people who didn't have an opinion, right or left. And, again, like it or not, this may be one business that's driving this discussion, but this is a town ordinance that can impact the entire town.
Yes.
And if it's positive for tourism, if it's positive for what we have right now, and if we're setting ourselves up for a situation to where this town is debt-free, to where we can address more safety concerns, to where we can address more things in the future to help this old road. We're talking about hundreds of motorcycles on this one road. Well, what about these brand new, fire engines in a very old firehouse? You want to make the same argument there. So if we're worried about the future, we're setting ourselves up for success by having the town debt-free to be able to handle things like this in the future. But if we're setting ourselves up for success right now, this is a sensible option to expand the parking.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to point out that some of the issues that you're talking about are county issues that we have nothing to do with.
Anyone else? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Short,
Aye.
Councilmember Sternberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Yao,
No.
Councilmember Olinger,
Aye.
Mayor Reeves,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramikis,
No.
Councilmember Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt.
No.
The motion carries.
All right. 10.11, adoption of historic overlay district guidelines update. Lewis. Andrew?
Mr. Mayor, I believe you skipped item
Huh?
10.10.
Oh, yes, that's right. Orders amending Chapter 8 of the Town Code, first reading. Yes, I did.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a proposed amendment to Chapter 8 related to a permit required for outdoor burning. The town's current language related to outdoor burning really does not contain very much detail whatsoever. This amendment proposes to add greater detail, identifying what specifically requires a permit, identifying what does not require a permit, identifying safe practices for those in all instances, as well as identifying the practice of obtaining a permit that it may be designated from the town manager, as currently requires the town manager to issue that permit. So the recommendation before you this evening is to hold this first reading on Ordinance O-2026-006, amending Chapter 8 of the Town Code by adding sections 8.3.1 through 8.3.4 related to permit required for outdoor burning, and to hold a second reading on this at your regular meeting next month. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any members may
I
have.
have a question.
John?
Am I reading this correctly, that all this does is prohibit burning of garbage, refuse, rubbish, which is prohibited, and then open burning that's prohibited with when atmospheric conditions or local circumstances make the fire hazardous? Those are the prohibitions on fire.
So open burning is still permitted with a permit. It requires that you come in for a permit.
So if I'm teaching my boys, a group of boys, how to start a fire with flint and steel in a fire ring, I have to get a permit?
You do not, because it's in a fire ring. If it's in a contained environment, so a fire ring with bricks or something along that around it,
Yes.
a barbecue, this
fire
defines a fire bowl. This defines those apparatus that essentially exempt you from requiring a permit. The current code, as it's written today, a strict interpretation would require you to get a permit.
Okay.
Even so, going so far as a barbecue.
Yeah.
So this is trying to, again, apply some common sense, provide the strict parameters. If you're having an open burn, essentially where you're burning yard debris, yard refuse in an open manner, that requires the permit. And the other ones, it requires that you have a safe distance away from a structure.
So follow-up question, real quick. On the prohibitions, there's no definitions of what atmospheric conditions or local circumstances, like what do those mean, and can they be put in the ordinance to really define what those are?
Essentially, that would be where the state fire marshal was declaring fire prohibitions on outdoor burns for those periods.
Okay. And then under refuse and rubbish, the end of each of those sentences says, and other such refuse. or other such waste? Why do we leave it so vague?
Essentially, we're trying to ensure that folks are not burning things that are going to emit noxious fumes. So we've tried to be as comprehensive as we can in this instance, but just leaving it open-ended in that regard in case there is something that was not contemplated that is producing those sorts of noxious fumes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Currently, the permit doesn't cost anything, the current permit we have. But I've forgotten now what the length of the permit is. It used to be monthly, then it was semi-annually. How long is the permit good for?
I'm trying to remember, Mr. Mayor, I know you get them regularly.
It's a good little while. I can't think.
It's either 6 or 12 months off the top of my head. I can't
About 6
recall
months.
exactly.
And it still has a requirement, still has a requirement to call
Dispatch.
Call dispatch that there's a fire, a controlled burn.
Correct. We do ask that dispatch be notified for those outdoor burns that you're obtaining the permit for. Again, those that are often generating large amounts of smoke, just so that, again, if they get calls, they get complaints, they are aware of a controlled burn in that area.
Anyone else? We're good with the first reading? All right. Thank you, Andrew. All right. 10.11, adoption of historic overlay district guideline update. Now, Lewis.
Thank you. And good evening. I'll go ahead and start with a little bit of background. So the town's Unified Development Ordinance establishes the Historic Overlay District, as shown in the map here. It encompasses 49 acres and includes nearly 200 properties within the town. The purpose of the district is to recognize areas having substantial historic resources which ought to be preserved or retained for future generations, provide protection to those areas as so to encourage the restoration and retention of historic structures therein, and to provide attractive and beautiful area which will complement the historic buildings and be appropriate for the town's character. The Architectural Review Board, or ARB, reviews all development and modifications to existing structures within the district. In addition to the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, the ARB uses the Historic District Handbook when reviewing development applications. It also serves as a tool for property owners when considering renovations. The existing handbook is out of date and is lacking in several key areas. It provides very little guidance on signs, new constructions, additions, and new technologies, such as solar panels. It is also not very user-friendly, as it is overwhelmingly text-based and lacks specificity. To help create a new set of guidelines, the town received a grant from DHR to cover 67% of the cost, and the town hired consultants Page and Turnbill. The process, which is outlined here, started in December of 2025. It involved a walking tour, 2 work sessions with the ARB, 2 community meetings, and the review of several drafts. All of that hard work brings us to today with the possible adoption of the final draft. So the final draft of the new guidelines is much more user-friendly than the previous handbook. The guidelines are now organized by project type, like window alterations or new constructions, rather than materials like the previous handbook. And graphic representation has been greatly increased. The beginning includes a guide of how to use the document, as well as a flow chart that outlines the process for ARB approval. These features and the overall organization make the guidelines much more user-friendly. The document also includes references to the UDO and links to additional resources for more information on how to maintain your historic property. Here is an example page from the new guidelines. As you can see, it uses pictures to show what is appropriate and what is not. Most of the pictures of good examples are going to be local to Culpeper. All of the negative examples, however, are going to be from other localities. The sections and lines are now numbered so that they can be cited and referenced easily. And here is another example showing the distance or the difference between the previous handbook and the new guidelines in regards to new construction. The previous document shown here on the left-hand side included only 3 small paragraphs. The guidelines now include 10 pages for new construction with pictures and diagrams showing what would be appropriate. So at their June 24th meeting, the ARB did vote to recommend that Town Council adopt the new guidelines. And I would like to thank Page and Turnbull for all of their hard work, as well as the ARB and all members of the community that contributed to this project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any question?
Mr. Mayor, I was just,
Go ahead.
not a question, but I think the public process was really effective. I think the way that you and the team stewarded that and brought the folks in, brought the comments in, it was very practical, it was very hands-on. I just think it worked really well.
Thank you. I was also very pleased with the feedback we got from the community.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
All right. Motion to approve the recommendation.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Sternberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Yao,
Aye.
Councilmember Ollinger,
Aye.
Mayor Reeves,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramikis,
Aye.
Councilmember Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Short.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Town and County Interaction Committee. Council may discuss potential items for the next committee meeting. There are currently no town items, and the next meeting date has not been set. Anyone like to have any discussion on this tonight? No one? Thank you. Council received, the town council monthly report. Is there any questions or comments? None? Do anyone else on council have anything else? If not, we are adjourned.